Their shared grief brought Carol Baum and Jeannie Ammon together. Both women lost their sons at a young age and joined forces to help others by creating the Mother's Healing Garden. At the center of the garden is a labyrinth.
And you can ask a question going in, and then when you get to the center, you often receive an answer or a comfort. And then as you walk back out, you integrate that answer into your thoughts.
The Mother's Healing Garden has now been used as a model across the country, and Carol and Jeannie say their friendship has also been essential to their own healing. Well, I'd like to thank Carol and Jeannie so much for joining me today. We're going to start off a little bit with both Carol and Jeannie telling us the stories of their children, the sons that they lost. Carol, can you tell me about your son who died in 1999?
Well, his name is Jeremy. There were so many wonderful things about him. I have decided right off the bat that I didn't want the suicide. He died from suicide. I didn't want that to be what people thought he was. And so the many sides of him were the love of music. He was excelled in all sports. He had a beautiful voice. He had many accomplishments. I would say his sense of humor and his he refused to allow others to be bullied, and he was in school. He would get in trouble for standing up for them. But yeah, he was just a wonderful kid, but he also had the side of him that had depression and anxiety. And apparently it became too much.
Tell me about when the depression and anxiety started, or when you knew that it was really a problem with your son.
I would say probably freshman, sophomore year.
Of high school.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And this was already quite a long time ago. You know, that would have been
21 years.
Yeah, 21 years. So was the stigma more pronounced and the understanding of this less back then?
Yes, I would say so. When we were notified, the police stopped and grabbed a priest from the church to come with them to notify us. And as soon as they walked in, I asked the priest, will they bury him? And he was just shocked. And I said, well, I had an aunt that died before I was born, and they wouldn't bury her in the church.
Because of the attitude towards suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's so hard. We all in this room know what it's like to lose a child and how devastating it is. The stigmatized death of both drug overdose and suicide, it's very hard to live in the aftermath of that. Those first few weeks, months, what were those like for you?
Well, I was in a shock. I just knew that right after we were told, my husband and I went in the other room, and I just said, we can't let this break us up, because I had always read how marriages break up over something like this, and I said, we have to make a promise that we will stay together through this. And there was just things like that kind of stick with me, that to just hear, and then within minutes I was questioning whether we'd be able to bury him in the cemetery, and whether they would have a service for him or what, it just...
But they did, and there was.
They did, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because things have changed somewhat since.
And continue to progress. Hopefully we see it more as the mental illness that it is. Jeannie, tell me a little bit about your loss.
Our son Wyatt was 24 when he died. He was serving in the Peace Corps in Zambia, Africa at the time, and it was the night before the induction, and the Peace Corps put them up in a hotel, and they were up late and watching movies and hanging out and having a really good time, excited to start their journeys to their villages. And he was playing keep away with a water bottle in the hallway, And the hotels there were probably built in the 50s and 60s, and so they didn't have safety glass in the window. And he walked backwards and leaned against a window at the end of the hall, and the glass gave way, and he fell 4 stories. And he didn't regain consciousness and died on the awning, actually, of the building.
Oh, my goodness. And you're so many miles away.
Yeah, it was the thing that happened was the director of the Peace Corps called my husband on his cell phone. And thank God he wasn't driving. And so he answered it. And then I heard my husband walk down the hall and said, you're going to have to tell her I can't tell her that. And I heard him saying that in the hall. I was in the bedroom getting ready for bed. And he handed me the phone, and the director told me that my son had died or had suffered fatal injuries. And I could not comprehend what the word fatal meant. I said, I don't know what that means. What does that mean? And it's so weird how your mind blocks that. And I didn't believe him. I called him a liar. And we hung up. He did call back, and then he sent emergency police over to confirm. And then, it was still really hard to believe because, yeah, he was so far away. And
such a horrible shock. And in all of our cases, really, I think it's never easy to lose a child, right? Nobody is ever going to say that. But if you have some time maybe mentally to prepare, because I have worked with lots of families through the Children's Miracle Network who had terminally ill children. They might have had cancer or some other disease. And not that it makes it any easier, but there's a way to mentally prepare that you are going to lose this child, and you get geared up maybe mentally to brace yourself for that loss. The 3 of us did not have that chance. We didn't see this coming. We didn't know it was going to happen. I think the shock is just so incredibly overwhelming, and I think it lasts for a long time. Don't you think so?
I do. And I haven't mentioned that when I first noticed he was getting depressed and not sleeping well and other things, he ended up getting into meth. And so
addiction issues are also a big part of suicide and mental health issues. So many, many times they go hand in hand.
Right.
It's all intertwined like all together.
And so he was doing that, and then he graduated high school barely and moved out on his own. And then I expected a call many times. He was in such a bad way. But he showed up on my husband's doorstep at work and asked for help. And so we got him into treatment, and
So you're hopeful then. You're hopeful.
Yes, we brought him home, and we had him for 6 months, and he was back to himself because it was outpatient treatment. And then the depression started seeping in. Well, he lost all his friends. He couldn't hang out with friends and all of that. And so, yeah, it was like it went from being so great and hopeful, and then within weeks it was like he was gone.
So you 2 moms have a little bit of time on the road of this grief journey as compared with me. What advice do you have to offer other mothers maybe who've lost children in the last few weeks, months, even the last couple of years?
My advice always is to be gentle with yourself. It's so important to give yourself the compassion you would give someone else, and allow yourself to make mistakes, to sleep too much, to speak your mind even when others don't want to hear it. Early on, I think that's really good advice. And also, too, if you find someone that helps you, take the help and spend a lot of time with the people that make you feel accepted.
And that's where your friendship comes in, right? Because Carol was a little bit further along, about 6 years. 6 years. And how did the 2 of you end up connecting?
We had known each other through mutual friends, but we didn't really hang out. When I heard that, I think you called me right after you heard about Wyatt. And I got in the car and went over after work. And I just told her, I'll be there for you. I'll wait till people go away, and then I will commit to being by your side, I think. Something like that.
Because people do go away.
They do.
You know, the initial outpouring of care and concern is wonderful, but that really can't be sustained. I guess people go on with their lives. It's sometimes hard to accept that. And people also often move on from the relationship with you as well because of what happened. But to have somebody who sticks around because you've been there, because you still are there. I mean, I don't care how much time goes by.
Maybe helped you. She'll say it helped her so much, but it helped me too because I didn't have that person in my life, really. Everybody kind of felt like, you'd go into the grocery store and I'd see someone coming down the aisle towards me and they'd turn around and go in a different aisle, or they'd leave their basket and get in their car and leave, or
so hurtful,
there was a lot
it?
of that,
Because why do you think just people can't handle it? They don't know what to say. It's not. I don't think people are intentionally trying to be
I don't
rude
think so
or
either.
mean or cruel, but it can come across that way.
Yeah, I did plenty of falling apart in grocery stores, I guess. Nothing else, with a son, a lot of our relationship was through food. So I was always making special
I do that with my son too. Always making him his favorite. Yeah, right. Getting what he wants from the grocery store, right, with the son. That's for sure true. Yeah, those triggers continue, I think, probably forever, right?
Mm-hmm. I think so.
And then the two of you worked on a project together, which I find so wonderful and beautiful. Can you talk a little bit about how the healing garden came about?
Well, I just had an inspiration about in January, 3 months after Wyatt died. I had this inspiration because I had learned early on. I had a niece who died when she was 2. She was born 2 weeks after Jeremy, so my sister-in-law and I carried the babies together, and she lost her baby at 2. And so I said, let's do a project. And so we started Padres in Del Rapids, but secondhand store to make money for books and the school to help out the teachers. And
so you just started a charity.
I just knew it was helpful for her and me to
have a mission, to have something to do. It didn't have to necessarily be a mission then associated about suicide.
Right. And that was that was a way back. So I just knew project helped with that. And so I thought we should do a project together. And so I have a love.
You and Jeannie.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I have a love of labyrinths, passed on to me from my parents. And
how come? Explain that.
They just in the church they went to, they used to bring a traveling labyrinth in, and my parents would set it up and help at Easter and different special occasions where people could come in and walk it.
As a form of meditation or prayer.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so I just always was very intrigued by that and thought, I want one, So one day I picked up the phone and called her up, and she was driving, and I said, I think we should do a project together. And
what did you think, Jeannie?
Well, I can remember right where I was on the highway when she called. And I'm like, okay, because it was pretty early in my grief, 3 months. And so I pretty much would go along with whatever Carol said would be helpful. We have some quite a few escapades. But I said, okay, where will we build it? And she said, well, I think we could do it and ask to do it at the park or maybe the cemetery. And I said, well, I was a realtor at the time. And I said, well, the land in the cemetery is really valuable. It sells for plots. They're not going to give us land. And she said, well, you don't know that. We could ask. And so I said, okay. And she called the funeral director and asked about it. And he said, well, it happens that we're having a meeting next week, a yearly meeting. And if you guys would want to come to the meeting and present your idea, we can see. And so we went, and they gave us the land. And they asked how much we needed.
So there's a lesson you never know until you ask.
Right.
Right? Yeah.
And we got a portion of 25 by 25 foot.
35.
Was it 35?
It is.
Yeah, the labyrinth's 25. Anyway, we got that, and then we got that finished, and then we went back to them.
So you created a labyrinth on this plot of land in the cemetery.
And some flowers.
And gardens around the outside of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the next year I said, I think we need a courtyard where we can put more flowers. And so we went back, asked for another 35 by 35, and they granted it to us. You have to realize that when we walked in the room that first time, it was a table with about, 8 or 10 men in their 80s and 90s that were the board.
I don't even know if they knew what a labyrinth was, to be honest.
Yeah. So I thought, okay, well, this ought to be interesting. But we gave our proposition, and they said meet us up the next day, and they showed us where we could do it, and we did it. And then it's 4 installments, so we did it in 4 years.
4 years.
We did a labyrinth, and then we did the
courtyard.
And then as we were leaving from asking for the land for the courtyard, the president said, I suppose you're going to want to build a chapel next. Well, we've got an outdoor chapel now. And then the 4th installment is a prayer wall and a scatter garden for ashes. So
how beautiful. How beautiful.
Yeah, it really.
And it's called the Healing Garden.
The Mother's Healing Garden.
The Mother's Healing Garden. And it's in Del Rapids, South Dakota.
Mm-hmm.
And how has it been received?
It's really amazing. We hear people from really all over the country that have visited it, and they will. We have brochures there, information brochures, and so they'll contact us either through Facebook or they'll contact us by calling or emailing us.
And I'll put a link to your Facebook page too on the show notes here. So,
and the comment is that they feel such a healing energy there, and it's nature for sure, but there really is a difference in the way the garden feels from anywhere else.
Why do you think that is? Do you believe it's the spirits of your children, or what do you think?
I think it's a holy, sacred place. I can't explain it, although I do feel like the veil between Wyatt and me is thinner there, and so I feel like he's with me when I'm in the garden.
I love that.
We both hated sitting by a gravesite. And that's why we wanted to do something in the cemetery that was different than sitting at a gravesite. And so sitting in a beautiful garden and being able to walk and meditate and have programs and music and whatever.
And how do you maintain it? Do you raise funds, or what do you do?
We did it ourselves for quite a few years, and it became
a lot,
overwhelming.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, we didn't get to enjoy it. We set up a fund at the Sioux Falls Area Community Foundation, and so we paid off the garden with sales of benches and pavers.
Sure.
And then whatever we pull in, it goes into that fund, and then it's for beautification purposes forever.
So it'll always be there to maintain this.
Mm-hmm.
And what kind of feedback do you get from people, or have you noticed people in the garden yourselves? Have you observed people, and what does that mean to you?
I always feel so grateful that the garden is there for them and that it affects them. You know, it has an energy beyond us. You know, we were the creators of it, but in itself, it's got a healing. It heals. It's a healing place. And so when we get the comments or we see people in the garden, that always is so, it's like getting feedback, you know, but I'm just so thankful and grateful that it exists.
Mm-hmm.
And did it help you heal as well?
It definitely did. And we brought in our families to help us. Our husbands
like you all did the project together.
Yeah.
Right?
And my husband is very hard for him to express his feelings towards the loss.
But
he struggles with that.
I think you're onto something there, because when my whole family gets involved with helping with Emily's hope, or helping with, it's something we all come together as a family and do in honor of.
It's the honor of.
Right. It's the honor of. And I think that no matter what you pick, you don't have to run a nonprofit. I always tell people you could do a garden. You could just do a small little thing together with the other people that loved the person you lost. It means so much more, don't you think?
Yes.
We all struggle. All the people around the person struggle. Do you feel like you are at peace now with the loss of your child, or not? Have you found peace with that?
It ebbs and flows.
Still.
Yeah.
After
You're
22
right.
years.
I'm involved in so much as far as playing music in hospice, and I play at nursing homes. I've written CD, and I just have thrown myself into so many things that honor him, and he's always by my side, and especially in those things that I've done. I never would have done all of that if it wasn't for what I've experienced. I'd rather not have done all of that, but since that's where I am, I just realize it's so helpful to do anything that honors him.
What about you, Jeannie?
It's different now. I think the memories aren't as sharp. And so when I think of Wyatt or remember things, it's with a joyful feeling now, which is a huge change from the pain that it was early on. Also, I was just watching my grandson play baseball, and he was in the dugout joking around with the other kids, and I remember Wyatt when he was that age and how important that those friendships and that camaraderie were. And so those kinds of things bring a nostalgia, but it's not painful like it was. It's more
comforting?
Yeah, kind of comforting, and it causes a melancholy feeling.
It's bittersweet.
It is, yes, and it's just the before and the after, I mean, it's hard to explain, but it does get more palatable,
You tolerate it better. I think that's true. I think one of the things that I thought a lot about, and maybe you did too, especially in the first year to 2 years after I lost Emily, was, oh my gosh, I have to go. I mean, who knows, maybe I'll die tomorrow, but I could live another 30, 35 years or however long it is. I don't know. How do you go on with your child year after year, And that was kind of stuck in my brain. But somehow, and people always say to you after you lose a child, well, I couldn't survive that. I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you do what you do. I'm sure you both have heard that. But it is just something like you just continue to put one foot in front of the other, and then your life does change, as you were talking about, doing things that you never thought you would do and doing things in his honor that you wouldn't have had to do had he still been here. But there are also very rewarding and positive things that go along with that.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want to go back to the person I was. I would like to go back to where I had my son.
Right, because I think I'm a better person than I was.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I was a bad person before.
No, but it does.
But I think I'm a more empathetic, less judgmental, understanding human being. Probably empathetic. Mm-hmm. I always had empathy for people as a journalist, doing stories with people. But now I really get it.
And the big change I saw too is just that the nonsense of people in life, and like those nonsense conversations, like you're like
small
really?
talk,
yes,
drama.
Like, don't have time for that anymore.
Right, because you understand, especially in the case where you lose a child suddenly and unexpectedly, you realize how none of us are guaranteed the next minute, And I think you really, it just hits home in a way that it's not abstract anymore. That's not an abstract idea anymore. It's a reality. And so, you don't want to put up with the BS, so to speak.
That's exactly it. Yeah, we used to talk about that a lot.
It is a struggle. I would say we've all had our ups and downs, no doubt, and the aftermath of our children's deaths. And we've found outlets. My outlet is doing this podcast and running things with Emily's Hope. Your outlet has been an incredible garden that has helped other people and other things as well. I know that you all do many things. For mothers who are struggling, who feel like there's nothing left for them, what's their place in this world now? Do you have any advice?
I would for sure find a chapter of Compassionate Friends. That was invaluable to me. You're with other people that have been through, and they totally allow you to say and do whatever you want.
No one's going to judge you.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Carol?
Well, I'm dealing with that right now. And to me,
you know a mother who has lost two children.
I'm trying to help her find a purpose. Because
purpose
she
in the
doesn't
pain.
feel like she has any purpose she feels totally alone, even if she's surrounded by people.
Yes, I think that's a typical feeling.
I have
in grief.
We talk about grandchildren. I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have my grandchildren. They have been such a joy in my life.
And for me, I pour a lot of my focus into my other children. You both have other children as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. They're grown and,
Right, have their own lives, yeah.
But, I guess that goes without saying. I hate to, but they have...
But I think finding purpose in the pain,
mm-hmm.
and that isn't always, sometimes it drops in your lap, but that doesn't always happen.
Right.
So maybe you have to seek it.
And
that can be hard to do.
Signs, too. I always look for the sign, and what is the lesson to be learned from this?
Yeah,
Not
what
just
is
that.
life trying to teach you? Well, yeah, and that's part of the reason I do this podcast is in talking with mothers like you and sharing some of how I have felt in my own story,
mm-hmm.
is to help those moms and dads and grandparents who are listening, just to know. I think sometimes it helps us to know you're not alone.
Exactly.
That someone has walked
mm-hmm.
in these shoes before you. And there's, with drug overdoses and suicide, quite frankly, there are more and more of us than ever before. Well, I just want to thank both of you so much for creating the garden, for your desire to help other people in this journey, no matter who they lost, a child or a parent or whomever can, use this garden. And maybe you'll spark an idea. Maybe you'll, in other communities, maybe someone else will decide to do this in their community.
Well, that has been happening. Florida and Wisconsin, Brandon, somebody built a labyrinth, I think, on the
Canova.
Catholic Church.
Do people contact you and ask you about
mm-hmm.
it?
Mm-hmm.
And then they build their own. Well, wonderful.
And there's a lady from New York that came and interviewed us several years ago and wrote a book on labyrinths.
Twyla Alexander.
You want to just quickly explain?
Yeah, she found us on the Worldwide Labyrinth on... Is that
a website,
Facebook,
the Worldwide Labyrinth? Okay.
Society.
And I had registered our labyrinth. And so she found us, she was traveling to all the states and finding women that had created labyrinths. And then she was interviewing them and wrote a book. And
That's very cool.
Yeah, it is. So she's become a friend.
And there was one that she chose in each state. And ours happened to be it, even though it wasn't at our home. She made an allowance for that because it was kind of like a personal thing that we did.
Story.
And how do you think labyrinths help?
Labyrinth is a meditation prayer tool, and it can be done alone or in a group. And it's the theory behind it, or the way it works, is that when you're walking it, your brain works from the right-hand side of your brain rather than the left. And so you move into a kind of a different consciousness with it. And so the process, it can be used any way you want. You can dance in it. You can do anything. There's no set reason or rule. But a lot of people find that they're going there because they're troubled by either grief or they're trying to come to a decision on something. And you can ask a question going in, and then when you get to the center, you often receive an answer or a comfort. And then as you walk back out, you integrate that answer into your thoughts. And so the reason it works is because of the right brain thing. So
it's a way to maybe enter another state of consciousness, and then the answers come to you because they're there. You just can't access them
Exactly.
until you can change the pattern of your brain.
Yes.
That makes sense. And so have you received answers?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes with decision making, but like in the early phases, because it was still within the first year of Wyatt's death that we had the labyrinth built. And I remember going in, just in terrible pain, because that's pretty much all you do the first 2 years is live with constant pain. But I went in and I was looking up at the sky as I walked, and there was a flock of 4 birds flying overhead, and one bird flew off out of the formation off on its own direction. And that was like, I have 4 children, and that was Wyatt separating from them. And so, again, it was a sign, but I was open to it because I was in the labyrinth. And so when I got to the center of the labyrinth, it was like accepting that reality and
Acceptance.
Right, for that moment anyway.
Yeah, I know. Acceptance
Yeah.
comes and goes, doesn't it? But yes. And how about you, Carol? Is there anything from being in the labyrinth that...
My experience was every time, it seemed like early on when I would walk it and come back out, and then I just would stand at the beginning of the labyrinth and look out down the way, and it was just empty land, And so I would come up with these ideas like, we need more land to make.
So it spurs
So
your
it seemed
creative
like
process.
It really did that. I'd be like, I think we should do this. I think we should do this. So that it did that, but it has done. I mean, I'll go up there if I have something that's making me nervous, or I'm going to be playing somewhere or whatever, and I'll walk it and just pray that everything goes okay. Or
you find it soothing.
yeah, it just really helps me relax.
Well, I love that idea, and I hope that people who listen, maybe somebody listening to this podcast will get the idea to do one in their community as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's wonderful that you have done that and the gift you've given to so many others. So thank you very much, and thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thank you,
appreciate
Angela.
it.
Thank you for joining me for this latest edition of Grieving Out Loud. If you're enjoying the podcast, please consider giving a positive review. Wishing you faith, hope, and courage.